Salt. Today we're talking about salt. This is something I'm strangely passionate about, but I'm really excited to talk about. So, salt, as we know it, table salt. This is the one that most of us are familiar with. Morton's has a name in the industry. Salt has been around since the dawn of time. We hear about it in the Bible, we read about it in ancient scripts. The Romans actually used it as a means of money and exchange. Salt was very, very valuable in ancient days because it took quite a bit of work to dry and extract. Now, historically, salt came from the sea. It would dry up, it would be harvested, and then it would be used, like I said, for different purposes, for money and trade and all kinds of things. Now, over time, it wasn't as available. So they started mining for salt. There's stories of people in the US in the 1800s that had salt mines to get salt. Now, fast forward, and in the 1900s, they discovered ways to make salt in a lab. So that is cheaper and easier than paying people to manufacture it. Thus, table salt was born. So, this is a lab made chemical combination of sodium and chloride. Now, people had a cheaper and more accessible way to get salt. As you know, this can be anywhere from 50 cents to $1. It's basically free. So, salt was now available worldwide, and people were enjoying their salt. Now, in the same time, early 1900s, people started to develop goiters. Goiters, as many of you know, is when the thyroid tissue swells. There can be many reasons this happens. But at that time, they discovered that one of the reasons this happens is because of a lack of iodine in the thyroid tissue. So the powers that be, the World Health Organization, got together and said, we should add iodine to our table salt. Everyone's eating salt. Let's just add iodine to it and we'll kill two birds with one stone. So iodine was added to table salt and people began eating it. Now, unfortunately, that correlated with an increase in worse thyroid problems, specifically autoimmune thyroid issues like Hashimoto's and Graves'. And on the other end, this table salt that, remember, is lab made was causing issues with swelling in the blood vessels and fluid retention problems. Enter blood pressure meds. So now people are getting thyroid medication and blood pressure medication that they didn't need before table salt was a standard item in our food supply. So we've got a problem here. The table salt is the problem. I have been saying for years to ditch the table salt, but I realized recently that I haven't been saying it loud enough. What helped me realize that was this new book that has come out right here, The Thyroid Reset Diet from Alan Christiansen. I love this guy. Great doctor, great information, great book. I read this in about 2 hours. It's a very simple read. Highly recommend it. But he talks in his book more about the history of iodine supplementation in the diet, adding it to salt, and how that saturates the tissue in the thyroid. And too much iodine is not a good thing. So he presents some really good research in his book about how humans now, we are saturated with iodine so much so that the thyroid gland cannot keep up with it. So the thyroid needs about 50 to 200 micrograms of iodine a day. What does that even mean? The average person isn't thinking about that and doesn't even care. So in his book, he breaks down what that actually looks like. A quarter teaspoon of salt provides your entire day's worth of iodine. So quarter teaspoon of this has about 50 micrograms. Now here's where the problem comes in. All of our commercially made packaged foods are made with this salt. So one of my favorite quotes about additives is that the effect of additives is additive, meaning if all I ate for the whole day was a quarter teaspoon of salt, I'd be fine. I wouldn't be oversaturated with iodine. But throughout the day, I'm eating all of these different items that are made with iodized salt. So by the end of the day, I could be eating hundreds of thousands of micrograms, which equals thousands of milligrams. So in his book, he did some really interesting research and he provided some numbers on what the average American is eating. If we're eating things like dairy, which is very saturated with iodine, if we're eating things like bread, very saturated, any baked goods, anything that's a packaged product, they have the iodine from the salt and also from different ingredients that they use iodine to either kill off pathogens in the food or to help emulsify the food. Iodine is a really good thing for food additives. So now the iodine numbers are shooting up and we're eating it. And one of his compelling tables in the book, he shows a chart of how some of us are getting 3,000 milligrams a day. That's massive. That's way too much iodine. So in this scenario, iodine saturates the thyroid tissue and the thyroid now cannot function. It's interesting because we've known this in the medical field for a very long time. If you're having a thyroid storm, as in your thyroid is producing too many hormones, the way that they slow it down is to give you massive doses of iodine. So the medical world knows that if your thyroid's working too fast, just throw a bunch of iodine on it and it'll stop working. Any of you with Graves' disease may have taken radioactive iodine. Similar concept, or sometimes they give massive doses of iodine to slow down the thyroid gland. What happens in this case is the thyroid gland sucks it up like a sponge, and then it's oversaturated and it cannot produce T4 and a small amount of T3. Now, with that iodine in there, we start to get some messages throughout the body and the immune system. This isn't right. This is not okay. And in immune triggered thyroid issues, the immune system then will send out antibodies, either anti-thyroid globulin or anti-TPO, to start attacking the thyroid tissue because there's a problem here. That is how iodine can trigger a antibody attack. So you've probably heard me say that before. I am not a huge supporter of iodine supplementation. I don't recommend it for anyone, but I especially don't recommend it for women who have Hashimoto's or Graves'. In my own history with Hashimoto's, I saw dozens of practitioners, and several of them did recommend high dose iodine. That is a very common mistake in the naturopathic and the functional medicine world. Every single time I did that, though, I felt worse. My gut got worse. My symptoms were horrible. And I would often end up with skin stuff that would come out of that. So, iodine, don't recommend supplementing. Now, back to the salt. This has to go too. So, if you are currently eating table salt, go throw it away right now, please. End this video, toss your salt. Now, some acceptable options, and one of my favorites is simple kosher salt. I love this stuff. It's like delicate little flakes you can sprinkle on food. It has a nice crunch. I'm obsessed with kosher salt. Good stuff. Malden sea salt, another great option. This one, again, is like a flake salt, really fun to finish foods with, has a great crunch. Celtic sea salt. This one is a little coarser. It's not my most favorite, but I really love it for cooking. It also is great if you're going to like brine vegetables. This stuff is fantastic. Great mineral profile, iodine free. I'm on the fence about Himalayan pink salt. I have recommended that in the past, and also the real salt from the Great Salt Lake. Both of those are high in minerals. They are not lab made. They are really, really good profile in terms of nutrients. In his book, Dr. Christiansen, he put some information out there stating that Himalayan sea salt, also the real salt, have identical iodine content to table salt. I haven't been able to find research to back that up yet. I was looking last night trying to find where he sourced that. He actually even claimed that Himalayan salt has more iodine than table salt, but I can't find any substantiation on that. So I'm gonna keep that. We're just gonna table that, not table salt that, but table the Himalayan until I can get more data on that. Because I do like Himalayan, and if you're not eating a ton of it, it's still a good option. But the take home here, the reason why table salt is so toxic, it's made in a lab. The body is not used to this combination of chemicals, and they have to be buffered by a lot of water. And in buffering that, it upsets the adrenals, which pull down the thyroid. So table salt, not a good idea for any body systems, can lead to high blood pressure and thyroid problems. Get rid of it for that reason. Reason number 2, it's got the iodine in it that will oversaturate the thyroid, will cause the thyroid to slow down, and can trigger an autoimmune attack. So ditch the table salt. Try some of those I talked about. Let's see how you feel.